morning. We're very pleased to have you here for this briefing by the Reverend Jesse Jackson. The audio portion of our briefing is being piped into our centers in both Los Angeles and in New York. Reverend Jackson will have some opening remarks, and then we'll go to your questions. Reverend Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Pope. Let me express my delight of having this opportunity to share with you on this occasion. I look forward for some time now to meeting with you and to sharing with you our basic points of view. America is such a powerful nation in the world today. It can be a real force for war or for peace, a real force for joy or for pain. America walks across this earth with very heavy feet. And with that power goes the responsibility to help provide hope, to help give direction, to lead with foresight, with courage, and with integrity. In our campaign, we sought to fight for justice at home and peace abroad. If we embrace or live easily with injustice at home, we export those same values abroad. And so America's challenge this day is to live up to the highest and best of its ideals. Of course, that means measuring human rights by one yardstick. It means that we must overcome every evidence of racism and sexism in our measurement of the worth of human beings. That our nation has the responsibility to use its resources, its natural and intellectual resources, to help relieve the world of the misery index, wherein so many people are malnourished and sick, and babies dying prematurely, and people without adequate education to cope in today's world. We have the responsibility to use our resources to wipe out the misery index on the one hand, on the other hand to wipe out the growing danger index. Under the present administration, we've lost the lives of our boys in Central America, in the Caribbean, in the Middle East. We put more missiles in Europe. We're on a kind of nuclear collision course with the Soviet Union. Including this rise in the misery index, which affects the poor, and the danger index, which affects everybody, must be addressed. The Rainbow Coalition, pulling together people who want to have a new direction, the revival of an authentic and live progressive coalition in this country. We believe that peace is possible, and we will work to that end. Just this coming week, we intend to go to Central America. We're going to Panama to meet with the Contadora leadership there. And there are other elements in Central America that intend to meet with us while in Panama. We've been invited by the President, the General. We expect to meet, of course, with the Foreign Minister. We expect to leave there now and to possibly go to San Salvador and meet with Mr. Duarte. Hopefully those details will be complete before the day is out. From there to Havana, Cuba, to meet with Fidel Castro. From there to Managua, Nicaragua, and then back to Washington and on to Chicago. We must have as a mission to make the Western Hemisphere a war-free zone. We must talk with each other in this hemisphere. We must exchange ideas. We must exchange ambassadors. We must put all of our problems within a political context and begin to negotiate them to a safe and sane conclusion. We must be more aggressive in our foreign policy, using our diplomatic skills, our economic strength, and believe in developed minds and not in guided missiles as a way to solve problems. I remain convinced as we go to Central America that the imposition upon the crisis in that region of an East-West analysis is the wrong way to go. Fundamentally, the resistance movements there are born of reacting to years of oppressive governments dictatorial regimes, born of a tremendous amount of poverty and lack of education and disease, and a quest for a place in the sun. There's tremendous turmoil in Central America as peoples seek to overcome the scars of the Banana Republic and repressive regimes. Central America is not back door, it's next door. We must respect our neighbors next door, and we must use, as a foreign policy guideline, mutual respect. Central America needs North America. North America needs Central America. We are a superpower, and Central America is a superculture, and it is next door to us. And the use of negotiations and economic aid and technology and education, as opposed to big stick diplomacy, gumbo diplomacy, and nuclear threat, must prevail as we seek to resolve the crisis that now appears to be growing and one that could engulf us unless we use our judgment and go another way. That is basically what I would like to open up this dialogue with, and for the next 2 minutes you can ask any question you want.
I would ask very much that you identify yourselves by name, country, and media organization. Samir.
Samir Karam, Al-Kifah News Weekly of Lebanon. Reverend Jackson, it has always been said that if a president is re-elected for a second term, he is usually liberated from so many factors that is restricting his foreign policy. Do you believe that Reagan re-elected would be liberated from such factors, or it would put the whole world in a worse position?
If Reagan were to be re-elected, we'd move a step closer toward war. He basically has a military approach, military solution to solving problems, and in many ways his ideological bent is such a straight line, there's not much room for negotiations. We, in our foreign policy, must not be driven by communist paranoia or by the Russian bear or some other mystical animal coming through the window of vulnerability. The move toward going to China and talking with the Chinese was a step in the right direction. Communism notwithstanding, we are a superpower. We can relate to the other ideologies and religions and people of the world. The step or the gesture toward talking with Soviet leadership without so many preconditions until talking is not likely to take place is a step in the right direction. And of course, if we can talk with the Chinese and the Russians, we can talk with Cuba, which is just 90 miles away from Miami, Florida. A superpower must use its strength. Secondly, we must have and reserve the capacity to talk even with forces that we are in conflict with, even our adversaries. We must reconcile competing and conflicting interests. That's why in the Middle East, the basic fallacy of our foreign policy there is that we have too many interests and too few friends. There are 22 nations there, and we have some interest in relating to all of them in a positive way, and ultimately have enough moral authority to be able to, for example, when Iran and Iraq is in a conflict, to have the respect, sufficient respect and trust from the both of them to be able to convene them and to intercede as diplomats and not intervene as militarists. We have several interests in your region that must be reconciled. That is the moral interest that grows out of the fact that people are there. There's the geopolitical interest there because the region is a valuable region in terms of its worth to our country and to our our European allies, we have a tremendous interest in Israel. Israel must have a right to exist with security, within internationally recognized boundaries. We have an interest in the humanity and the preservation of Palestinian people. They need a state in which to survive. We have an interest in normalizing ties with the Arab world. We have an interest in reconciling those forces. And our nation at its best will get a Begin and a Sadat and convene them as no other nation could, and as indeed they could not convene themselves, and then use our strength to provide them mutual security and bring out of that chaotic relationship one that moves toward the order and some measure of peace. That same basic approach must be continuously applied in that region and expanded.
Simon Barber, Rand Daily Mail, South Africa. Will you be demanding tough anti-South African language in the Democratic platform, and if so, what?
Yes. Our nation cannot reconcile its commitment to human rights and labor rights with its partnership with South Africa. Under the Reagan regime, America is a very direct partner with and ally with South Africa. That's a source of shame in our nation, a source of moral disgrace. A, we should not license another American corporation to go to South Africa. B, those that are there should have a timetable to come out unless there's a new formula. And that formula should be enfranchisement of the people, investment. Disenfranchisement, disinvestment. When our nation helped to buttress up South Africa's economy with the International Monetary Fund loan, it increased our partnership, and we allowed American corporations to help South Africa get nuclear capability. It endangered all of Africa and the human race, and we became South Africa's #1 trading partner. It further isolated our nation in the world and left us with less moral authority. And our ultimate strength is not our military power, it's our believability, it's our credibility. And the people of the world must see us as a light in darkness and as the hope of the free world, and we diminish our moral strength in the world by embracing the apartheid regime of Pretoria.
Odette Granot, Ma'ariv Daily, Israel. Reverend Jackson, the platform of the Democratic Party support the idea of Camp David solution as the right way to proceed for the Middle East solution. Do you share this view, or if not, what is your own solution, or how we do proceed in the Middle East?
In my judgment, Camp David is a dramatic step in the right direction. First of all, an American leader convened warring factions and offered to them mutual security. I'm glad America had not been pushed into having a no-talk policy with Egypt. For if it had, it would not have had the capacity to convene Egypt and Israel. It moved two forces in the Middle East from fighting with each other to trading with each other. And ultimately, that's the vision that we must hold up for the Middle East, that we will transform fighting to trading as a basic characteristic of the relationship. And we use our strength to convince the Arab nations and Israel that they stand so much more to gain by trading than by fighting. Camp David, in a sense, has been abandoned during this administration. Of course, relations in the Middle East have become much worse as a result of our abandoning that approach and using our strength to convene all forces and to get them to the table.
Follow-up question? No follow-up questions. Right here.
Okay, my name is Stella Ampuero. I'm with the Nicaraguan News Agency. I'd like to know, what is the main message you're going to be taking to the people of Central America on this trip?
one, that peace is possible. And that number two, that we ought to embrace the Contadora process, the process of negotiations, economic and educational aid, as opposed to militarizing the region. Should appeal to all forces involved to cease fire and to begin to talk. Shall make that moral appeal to each of them. And that the imposition of an East-West analysis upon that problem is an inaccurate analysis, ultimately. And that the forces that are in power and trying to get in power by calling upon outside military intervention will only make problems worse. And therefore, rather forces for government leadership and the church must somehow summon the capacity to summon each other and to talk it out and not fight it out. And our nation ought to stand guard and be ready to offer in that process. In some instances, it may mean that America can use its strength to convene the warring factions and offer them mutual security. In some instances, it means offering economic aid or expanding trade relations. But America can play a great role in bringing peace and justice in Central America.
Abdul Salam Askarwi, Arab American Media Service. Reverend Jackson, your two colleagues have thought several times, Gary Hart and Walter Mondale, about the possibility of you being a running mate or to cooperate with you in such a way. But Mr. Hart came back and he said, because your position in the Middle East is different from his position and Mr. Mondale, then you are not considered. How will you reconcile supporting the Democratic Party's platform if it will not accept your basic premise about your U.S. policy in the Middle East? And where do you see the Jesse Jackson Rainbow Coalition going after November 6th?
Well, first of all, I would never put position over principles. It's clearly to me that the principle that we must follow in the Middle East is to reconcile competing interests and not to isolate our interests in the Middle East. America has a tremendous investment in Israel, and rightfully so. One way to protect Israel is to supply Israel necessary aid and trade and defense. Another way is to communicate with Israel's adversaries and give them a reason not to be adversaries. America, therefore, must use aggressive diplomatic approaches, or not will end up using devastating military approaches. Talking is so much better than fighting. My competitors have used the process of not talking with Palestinian leadership and not adequately respecting other Arab leadership. The result is that policy has failed. It's not working. It's deteriorating. And we must hear the voices of members in the Knesset who cannot get a fair hearing in this country. We must hear the voices of Peace Now in Israel. We must hear the voices of the Labor Party in Israel. And our country and our leadership must be at least free enough to debate the options here as they are debated with democracy in the Knesset. There's far less of a democratic process in our own Congress about Middle East policy than there is in the Knesset. And I would hope that one thing our campaign will do by expressing our concern for all of humanity is to open up the process of more dialogue and allow creative solutions to come through. I remain convinced that peace in the Middle East is possible if America uses the sum total of its strength. We've given up our right to talk, and therefore we have less ability to resolve the conflict.
You asked about the future of the coalition.
The future of the coalition. The primary season ended technically June the 5th. The Rainbow Coalition, the mobilization of a justice and peace movement in this country in many ways has just begun. The first time we've really been able to reach out and convene the many hyphenated Americans and bring them into the political process. Asian Americans have never really had a place before, a platform. Arab Americans, Hispanic Americans, gays, lesbians, handicapped or disabled people, blacks, women, young people, Indian Americans, and all of these various hyphenated Americans that do not fall under the category of white or European have now found a place, and thus there's tremendous third world interest in the Rainbow Coalition, and tremendous fervor in the third world, because now the developing nations of the world will have a legitimate place in American politics, mainstream politics, as indeed it should. So beyond the convention, the continuous building of the Rainbow Coalition, continuing to raise the boats that are stuck at the bottom, reaching out across lines of race and sex and religion will be our mission.
Saudi Gazette and Awqas, Saudi Arabia. Reverend Jackson, you spoke in broad terms about the need to have a different approach to the problems of Central America, Southern Africa, and the Middle East. But will you put specific proposals